Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today's video I'm going to be making a chef's knife, but not just any chef's knife. I will be making my first ever integral chef's knife. And I've never made an integral before, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to run into some problems, but that's how we learn. I'm going to be making it from ball bearing steel mixed in with some ADCR V2 stock in between, and I'm going to give it a twist, and I will be filling it in with steel powder and all the nooks and crannies that is between the ball bearings to get a nice solid weld. Here I'm cutting some 2x2 square tubing that I'm going to be using for my canister, as well as some caps that are going to go inside of the canister. I'm often asked how I get my canisters off so easily, and the trick to that is to use white spray paint. White spray paint has a chemical inside that makes the color white. That chemical is titanium dioxide, if I'm not mistaken, and it helps create a barrier on the inside of the can, and it keeps the can from welding to the contents inside. And by doing that, I'm able to freely weld whatever I want on the inside and have the billet come out relatively smoothly without much of any problems. They don't always come out as beautiful as sometimes where they just slide right out. Sometimes I have to force it out a little bit, but I've never had a canister actually weld to the contents on the inside using this method, so I definitely recommend. After all the materials are prepped, I'm going ahead and just start layering in my ball bearings in between the steel, trying to get it as evenly as possible. And then I fill it in with some 1090 with 2% nickel powder. It's a slow process, but I just hammer it in with my hammer and keep vibrating it so the powder falls in to every little corner and crevice that I can find, making sure everything's properly filled. That way I can ensure the best weld without any voids or any air gaps. Once the billet is nice and full, I put my cap. I make sure to leave a little bit of space, that way the cap fits inside, and I weld it on. And I always leave little holes in my welding, not because I'm a bad welder, but because, you know, I leave them there on purpose. That way gases can escape. I always do my press first from the top down, making sure to weld those caps in and make sure to solidify everything in one go. It's important to compress the steel as much as possible to get that powder to weld as best as possible, and then I just go on hitting it with the squaring dice to make sure I compress it from all sides and get a nice solid billet. All canisters are going to form a little bit of an air gap on the inside, and that air gap, you can see it from where I have almost like it looks like a cold shut, and you can see how it's starting to form right there. I always like to hit it from the corners because it opens up that bubble and it makes it easier to cut out and pry it open. Here, nothing's stuck to anything. The billet's on the inside, and all I gotta do is give it a couple taps, and as you can see, it slides right out. And this is one of the more difficult ones I've run into lately, so that goes to show how easy it is when you use the spray paint method. But it has to be white spray paint. Here I'm using 1-inch kiss blocks to work the material down to a manageable size so I can give it the twist I'm looking for. Once I got it down to size, I like to press in the corners as well, making it pretty much an octagon. What I'm doing is taking away the hard edges so that when I twist it, it keeps it from shearing as much as possible. It just makes for a safer twist. And here I go, I'm going to start my twist. Here I flip the billet around, and now I'm going to continue twisting. My hydraulic press does not have locking wheels on it, so it likes to wiggle around as I do this. I'm trying to make sure I'm keeping the twist as consistent as I can. That way I get a nice, tight, clean pattern. And yes, I am struggling very much. The compressed air here lets me isolate a certain area I want that needs more twisting. Here I'm just straightening out the billet, and I'm going to leave it in the forge overnight. Now that it has cooled down, it's the next day, and we have a nice tight twist Damascus billet. So I quickly took some time and ground off the tip and edged it, and that's looking pretty cool. Obviously that's not the pattern we're gonna get. We're gonna get the outside of it, but it's looking promising. I just gotta figure out how long do I need it. Probably around 6 inches at least. Now that I have my 6-inch piece separated, I go on ahead and start forging. The initial forge that I do is to separate the tang and the bolster from the rest of the material that's going to become the knife. Here I'm going to start forging in the tip little by little and getting the initial shape of the knife. Afterwards, I flatten out the knife as best as possible, and I'm going to start spreading the material out sideways. That way I can get the width I want for this particular chef's knife. I'm looking to make something around 2, maybe 2 1/4 at the highest part of the heel, and then work myself out from there. And slowly and surely I'm just getting the width that I need with the hydraulic press. Now that I have it pressed roughly to where I want it, I'm going to start refining the shape with the hammer. Even here while I'm forging it, it's still about 1/4 thick overall, so I'm going to start working down the thickness with my drawing dies. They're pretty aggressive. I don't have any less aggressive at the moment, but I'm just gonna slowly start getting that length out of it. That way I can get the roughly 8 inches that I'm looking for this knife. Now it's actually starting to look more like a knife with the knife shape, and I'm gonna start working in the heel of the knife. And slowly just pulling out the heel, pulling it down, and working the rest of the knife down as well. I am by no means an expert. I'm just a hobbyist that's learning slowly as I'm going by, and I spend my time watching a lot of Neil Kamamura's videos, and I really enjoy his forging videos, and I like to implement as much hand forging as I can once the billet gets down to, you know, a relatively workable size. I do have a hydraulic press, so I use it, but for the fine tuning I'd like to always go down to the hammer. Here I'm isolating my hidden tang portion, and I'm just working it down with the square dies. Now that I think about it, hindsight, I should have used my squaring dice to isolate the bolster on the other side as well, but now I know for a future it's going to give me a nice crisper transition. Here I'm just going to forge out the tang. It's easier to forge it down by hammer once it gets a little bit thinner because the heat likes to stay in. The press really pulls the heat on it, so it's actually easier to draw out the tang by hand. And now the knife is roughly the shape that I want it. I'm just straightening it out, making sure everything's nice and straight before I go on ahead and let it cool down slowly. It's really cool how you can see through the scale. You can see the different patterning in the knife and how the bands are going through. I'm not sure if it looks very nice through video, but in person it looks very nice. Here what I'm doing is I'm grinding off with an abrasive wheel. All the scale that's on it, that scale is very bad for the belts. It tears them up, so I always like to hit it with a hard wheel to clean it up before going off to the belts. And now that I'm here on the belt, I'm just cleaning up the profile, getting the shape I want. I'm not very good yet. I'm not all that proficient when it comes to hand forging, so I like to grind in whatever I couldn't forge in. So the knife is coming out pretty good so far, but I'm gonna go back into the forge to move this the integral bolster and the handle down, because, well, the hidden tang, not the handle, because as you can see the way it sits, it curves up, and once I have the actual handle on, it's gonna be curving downward like that, and I don't want that. I want it to follow the same direction as the spine, so I have to force it down. So we're gonna go back into the forge, heat up the tang, and move it. It just takes a couple whacks to get it roughly where I need it, but those minor hits do warp the knife. So here I'm using just a rubber mallet to try to straighten it up without causing any real damage to the knife, any deformations, just trying to straighten it out. If you would like to see me make a hide mallet, I'm not sure what they're called, a mallet from, leather, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and I'll definitely, take that into account and make one soon. I do not know how to make one, but I will research it and figure it out and bring the video for you guys. That way, whoever wants to make one can make one. And it gives me an excuse to make one and have one in my shop. Because this little mallet does not have hardly any weight to it. I don't have a particular jig for doing these bolster areas, so I'm just taking it with my smallest wheel, and I'm just gonna eyeball it to try to clean up that transition. Now that I'm ready to heat treat, I'm going on and normalizing the knife. That way I can relieve any of the stress that I have in the knife, and it's really cool to watch it just slowly cool down. After about 3 cycles of normalizing, I go to the kiln and I go on ahead and heat treat the knife, making sure it's nice and straight. The bolster does keep a lot of the heat, so it's important to make sure that the knife is nice and straight and that the bolster is not tempering the knife too much. I already grounded some on here in the bolster area right here, just to try to flatten it out, get it even. But we are out of the temper for everything else, and it's looking very good. Carbide file guide, that way I can get this part nice and clean. That way I can transition onto the handle and it can be nice clean as possible. Here I'm using a file guide that I bought from Pop's Knife Supply. It comes in real handy to get these nice straight edges. especially for making the transitions nice and as seamless as possible. Now that I'm pretty close to my final dimensions, I'm going in with the file and I'm just cleaning everything up. As I said, this is my first time doing this, so hopefully it comes out nice and good. If you have any tips for integral knives and how you do your bolsters and all that stuff, be sure to leave them down in the comments, and I'll take that into consideration for future knives. I will take all the help I can get. Here I'm just doing some finish grind on the knife and trying to get it down to the dimensions that I need. I like to hit it with the disc sander. It's a 1 degree bevel disc, so it doesn't pull it away from me. And I like to try to get that edge as flat and as even as possible with the disc sander. So this is as far as I'm taking the knife for now. I just got hand sanding left to do on it. Everything else is pretty good. Got some really deep hand sanding to do in here, but it's easier to do it by hand. It might take longer than doing it by machine, but it's going to be easier. You can see the details coming through from the grind. You see the ball bearings in there and how it twists. So I'm really excited for that. And next up, I'm going to start working on the handle. Get it ready for fit up before I do my final hand sand. This is box elder burl. It's dyed in blue. It's stabilized. It's really pretty. I really like it. So hopefully it matches up well with this knife. This stuff gets really gummy on the drill bits, so it's important to take it in light, small passes. Once I have it, the holes drilled roughly to where I need them, I go in with a hand broach I bought from Alex Steel Co. Now that the handle is fit up, I'm going to epoxy it in. I'm putting wax on the tank first, that way I can put it off later, and it's going to be perfect size. This is a nice little trick that helps create a nice tight fit on the handle, between the handle and the knife, and makes it easier for adjustments later. It's been 20 minutes, so the epoxy has solidified, so now I just gotta pull it apart. The wax really helps out, and there we go. The wax really helps out in the release. Now we got a hole made for our tank. Before I fix that, I want to show you guys that the tip on this knife is broken, because while I was fitting up the handle and doing all that stuff off camera, I dropped it and it snapped the tip off. But it's no big deal. It's a quick fix on the grinder. I'll just do that off camera and we will move on to hand sanding. Now it's time to hand sand this little part right here, get this transition looking good. When I forged it, I crushed it here with my round dies. I should have used my square dies and I would have probably had my my transition a little bit farther up, but I like it. It's nice. It gives a good pinch grip. So I gotta clean this up right here, all sandpaper. Let's get started. So I finally got the knife up to 800 and it's looking pretty good. You can see the pattern in there really nicely. Here I've rough drawn my handle shape and I'm gonna cut it out with the bandsaw. It's just rough. Afterwards I'll shape it up with the 2x72 grinder and just slowly start taking off material. Alright guys, so it's a quick little update. This is where we are at. I have the handle roughed into 36 in some spots and 6 and 80 on other spots. Now I just gotta hand sand everything from here that way. I make sure that in my transition that my steel to wood, my wood is bigger. That way I can sand it exactly where it needs to go. Make sure it's not sticking out. I had an issue where I over sanded, so I had to grind some of the bolster down, but it is what it is. And now that everything's fit up and roughly to shape, I'm gonna go on ahead and glue up the handle. Now that the handle is completely glued and dried, I'm gonna hit it with this 120 belt and get the transitions almost to flush. Once I get pretty close, I'll go on and do it by hand. Now that the knife is ready, all I have left is hand sanding. I will hand sand the blade up to 1200 grit and the handle to 1000 grit. And in the edge we go. Here I want to take a moment to thank you guys for watching. And if you like these kinds of videos or if you like these kinds of builds, let me know in the comments down below. And subscribe if you're not already subscribed. It really helps the channel grow and I would really appreciate it. Here I'm going to use some axe wax that I have in a baggie because I accidentally dropped it and stepped on it. And I'm using it to help seal away the handle and the knife from moisture. I like to heat it up with my heat gun first and then I wax it all over the knife and give it a really nice clean coat. Axe wax, if you see this and you want to send me a new one or another company that makes waxes like this that are food safe, you want me to try them out, be sure to send some to me, hit me up on email, and I would be very happy to try your product. Over the years, I've used different methods for sharpening my knives. Lately, I've been using these diamond metal plates. And I like them because they're easy cleanup and they're easy to start with. You don't gotta wait for the whetstone to to absorb water. You just grab it and you start sharpening. And they're very easy clean and hassle free. So lately that's what I've been using. And here's a close look at the finished product. I really like how the handle turned out. It's very pretty, a little bit thinner than what I wanted, but overall it's pretty nice for my first integral. And the pattern just came out absolutely beautiful. I'm very happy with that. And hopefully you enjoy these last couple of shots I put in because I got a lot of crap on my katana build, which is actually from the very similar material as this. So if you want to check it out, be sure to check out the videos at the end of the screen. And I really appreciate you guys. Thank you very much for watching and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.